Yes, we're back. It feels like it's been a decade since we have recorded, put an episode out, but we are here for season 2.
Yeah.
We are glad to be back. It's been an interesting journey.
Yes.
I guess we'll talk about it as we go through how we ended up in 2025 before we actually got back to recording.
Yes. But all those episodes before were 2024, so it's fine.
Yeah, it works. It works. Man, we are excited to be back. This season's gonna be good, man. Like just some of the people we've got lined up. There'll be a couple people coming back from season 1, but season 2 is gonna be even better than season 1, and hopefully we've gotten better. If not, just keep praying. Like we said before,
Keep
it's
hoping,
fine.
keep believing, you know.
It's a journey.
It is a journey. It is a journey for sure. I kind of look back at some of season 1 stuff, and I was looking at some of it today, but just in between the gap, man, and just all of the things that people shared and talked about, and all the things that God has done.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's what this whole thing is about.
Right.
Just sharing those stories and getting that encouragement from it. And like certain things, certain episodes I would go back and look at, and even though we may have recorded that thing in January of 2024,
Still applies.
still applies.
What did Delilah say? Still applies.
Yes. It still applies. It still works. And
Yeah.
it would be encouragement for me.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh yeah, we already hashed this out, right? Through fellowship and conversation. And so the Lord's like, why are you worried about that? I've already, So that's kind of the cool thing that just kind of blessed me about going back and just looking at it. So if you have not watched all of season 1, do it.
Yeah.
Do it
Link in
and
the
do it
bio.
again. Yes. We'll drop it in the description.
Yeah.
But definitely go back, check out some of those episodes, some of those stories. You will be blessed. I promise you. And not because we're in it, because God is in it. He's in all the stories. He's in all the testimonies. And
all the details.
Oh, yes. All the details. And I think for some of those guys that do come back for season 2, man, the things they're going to be able to share with us from then versus now of how God's been working is going to be awesome, man. So I'm excited.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great.
About you, Blake, what have you been up to, sir?
Man, moving, all this stuff, moving and shaking. I'm super excited for today's podcast.
Yes.
Speaking of amazing stories,
yes,
and how God is in the details, this gentleman to my left here was definitely brought to my life like God provision, God provided, like God just orchestrated all of this. So we have Dillon with us today, Dillon Hinson.
The man!
Dilly.
Finally. Behind the screen for the whole last season.
The blessing has been to not only my life, but to our church. Just all around, just amazing guy. Brother from another mother. His mom swears that she birthed me.
Yeah.
I claim that. Shout out Lisa. Lisa and Tracy.
Make sure I get the inheritance.
Yes. Put me in there. Fourth son. But yeah, we have Dillon here with us. He's going to share a little bit of his story, but we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, it's nice to finally be on, and I know I was texting with Dawn and Blake, and he's like, "So what are you going to talk about?" I'm like, "I got no idea. we're gonna roll with it." Yeah. So
talk about the Lord.
Yeah. Well, I'll introduce myself. Probably just go through kind of my story and background and upbringing, and how the Lord has sustained that and kind of brought me to where I am today, because I don't think I'd be here without him and without people like you guys around me and supporting me and being with me through a lot of things. So I'll just introduce myself. And I think a lot of people behind the screen will probably know me, but my name is Dillon. I grew up in Arizona, Phoenix,
the flaming part of the country.
The oven of the U.S. Where it feels like you're just getting a hairdryer blown on you 24/7.
Yes.
But I grew up there, just in North Phoenix. Pretty good childhood. Through early upbringing, it was, I don't remember a whole lot, but I just remember, my parents were were awesome. My dad had us involved in Boy Scouts, and
Nice.
we were always going and doing things and exploring and having fun.
Dillon still is very much a Boy Scout.
Yeah,
So,
I still love to go
Still
out
very
and
much.
backpack and get out in nature. I think that's one of the ways I definitely.
Are you still starting fires with 2 sticks?
I could, but I'll tell you what. Nowadays,
Yes.
a lighter or some matches, it's a little bit easier.
Get the fire pit going.
Depends on how much time I have.
See the demonstration right now.
How much time I have and how cold I am.
Get the kindling in here.
Yeah. I know, like, when we go out and we do, like, family events, we'll have fires.
Yeah.
I'll go out and, I can restart it from a coal, just blowing
Yes.
on it and get it going. And Jordan's always like, was that necessary?
It is.
And I'm like, it's gonna happen.
We have to keep refining our talents.
Right. We're
Yeah.
practicing.
Yeah.
You'll thank me later.
Yeah. So I grew up in doing a lot of scouts. And, found a lot of brotherhood kind of in that.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up in the church, right? And I know a lot of my close friends and what I would consider family here now. A lot of people have been privileged to grow up in the church and have parents.
It's a requirement in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, and have parents.
Put on the application.
Parents who took them to church regularly and they grew up there. Like I know you grew up in the church, and I'm not sure about. Did you grow up in the church?
Grew up in a church.
Yeah.
So like in the hospital in the church next day. No?
Yeah. So I didn't personally. Like I grew up again just going and doing a lot of stuff, and we were always involved in things, and again Boy Scouts and sports and a lot of things that took up time but weren't like the most fulfilling or
right.
At the time, looking back now, didn't really like give much of a purpose other than just consuming time, right? And though later on in my life, especially like through scouts and stuff, I found a lot of things and coming into the Lord that gave me purpose and stuff. But early on, though, it was not like just running. It was nice to go and do things as a young kid, and I do thank my parents for that, like keeping us occupied and out of trouble. But that's about all it did was keep us out of trouble. And through middle school, for the most part, that's how it was. It was nice, running around. And around that time, though, my parents ran into some trouble with their relationship, and my mom ended up moving out. My parents, they didn't legally separate, but they physically separated. So my mom got her own apartment, and then my dad stayed at the house. And so on the weekends, my brothers and I would split time between. So my mom would get us on the weekends, and my dad would keep us during the week. And so it was just a very interesting time in my life where I don't know if a lot of people experience that. I'm sure they do, but splitting time between your parents in 2 different locations as a young kid is at the time I didn't understand why or what was happening. So it was just this confusing. Why do I have to go to my mom's on the weekend, but stay with my dad during the week, and he would take us to school, and that it was like that for I don't know. I can't recollect exact timelines, but I think it was probably for about a year or so. And my mom, she's a recovering addict. Grew up and she would go to AA, and actually, that was one of the fun things that my brothers and I would do. My dad would do my mom did AA in 12-step. My dad did AA as well, and so we would go with him on the weekends on Saturdays, every Saturday. We would go to his group and we would hang out with him and go to Nar-Anon and Al-Anon. And I think that's kind of earlier on. It's not 100% faith-based, but that is a portion, a good portion of it. And I think my mom and my dad both grew up religious, but they never implemented that in our family. And so, my mom was Catholic, and I think my dad was, I don't know, I can't remember. He grew up in Northern California, and I think they just dabbled a little bit in church, but didn't never devoted like my mom. She was like a devout Catholic because her parents were Catholic. So she'd go to mass and do church and all that. And so through 12-step and recovery is where my mom started to get kind of back into faith and discovering that like on her own. My dad wasn't really involved in that other than of course being in 12-step himself. Right. But he did it for himself, but also more to like support my mom.
Right.
They do that with like if you have a family member dealing with addiction, they'll suggest that like family members that deal with a person that has addiction go to 12-step too, so you kind of like have support as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like
yeah,
and so like he obviously was involved with drinking and all that, but he didn't go to the extent that my mom. So he was still part of the addiction, which is why he was going. And so like through that, my mom started to kind of, I think, explore her faith more again. And so in that time of them being separated and going back and forth, that's I think when my mom started to realize that. After they parted ways, and like I said, it was like that for probably a year or so. And I can't recollect like the exact timeline. But eventually they kind of settled things and she moved back into the house and things stayed kind of awkward or like how they were for a while even after she moved back in. But I can remember vividly one time, which is kind of what set us on the path of getting back into the church and really like me finding my faith was it was one Saturday. She was like, hey, I'm gonna go to church and like I'm leaving in 15 minutes, right? Like
15-minute warning.
Because like
boys,
and so like but she had started I think at that time to go with her friends. She built like a pretty good gathering of like ladies that through 12-step and Narnon and those things and starting to talk through her faith, she had built a group of friends that were supporting her,
that community.
And I think she finally realized like in her journey like that was a necessity, right? And one weekend she was like, hey, I'm going to church, I'm getting ready to leave in 15 minutes. You guys can either come with me or you can stay. Right? Like you can come with me or you can stay. And I remember the whole family like getting dressed, getting ready, and we went to church. And for me that was like my
15-minute club. I wish that would happen.
Yeah. And I think like I think that just thinking back was like my first experience going to church. And again, kind of timelines are a little blurry, but it was around like middle school to I'd say probably like 7th or 8th, probably 6th, 7th or 8th grade, somewhere around there is when we finally started going.
So before the high school
years. Yeah, definitely before high school.
Middle school youth groups are.
Yeah,
that's good.
But like again, kind of for me at least, I'm pretty young, so that was like I feel like late into my my life, right? Yeah. Like at the time, I was probably like 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. And again, a lot of people here grow up in the church, so like my nephews, all they've known has been going to church and going to Royal Rangers and all that. So for me, I didn't even start exploring that or understanding that until middle school, which is about where Caden is now. So I can only think about how blessed he has been to just know that, and how many things he probably has been able to avoid because he's had that. So like we started going to church pretty regularly. And again, like my mom, her ladies group that she had was kind of pivotal in that. And we actually, my brothers and I got really close with a lot of her ladies group, and they used to like take us out to Dave and Buster's, and we would go to.
I'd be their friend too.
Yeah, benefits.
Sure.
So like they really like they saw how much like my mom and like we needed like a support system. And so they really like stepped up, and we would go to concerts like Winter Jam, and they got my mom into Christian concerts. And like we all kind of like started to fall in love with it.
I've lost a lot of hearing.
Yeah.
Listen, Toby Mac was holding down that scene for a while. His like set list. This man, how old is he? Like he's jumping off speakers and stuff.
Yeah. So like, we really started to get kind of involved into like going to these Christian concerts and things. And I remember one of the big ones they had up in it was in Heber, Arizona, northern Arizona. And it was like a 2 or 3 day concert with like all kinds of artists, like big artists like Casting Crowns, Third Day, and all the older like that's not,
they were legit back in the day.
Those are who my mom was. She's like Casting Crowns, Third Day, like Charles Clay, like So like we did a bunch of those concerts, and I think between that and kind of going to church more regularly and stuff is how we really started to get involved more. And then again, my mom's ladies group was really kind of pivotal in that, and I think it was probably 7th or 8th grade year. After we'd been going to church for, I guess maybe about a year or two at that point. Not super long, but established enough. My whole family, I think one or two of my mom's ladies, we went to a Third Day Newsboys concert, and it was like an hour or two away, and awesome. Like OG Newsboys before they got the new lead singer and everything. With the Australian guy, we went to their concert, and awesome concert, super cool. And then at the end of it, they did an altar call. And they were like, hey, anybody who wants to give their life to Jesus, like, come to the front. And they did like an altar call. And I remember vividly, like, me and both my brothers, we went up and we responded to the altar call. And that's like the first when I like gave my life to Christ then. And I just remember.
Can I pause you?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you know what I see here, Blake? The value of community. The value of people saying, I have something I'm willing to give away. Right? Like, this is the main part of what we talk about all the time. Like, community will help restore you. It will help carry you when you need somebody to carry you. Like, all these things are what you're saying. It's like, so for us, like, I was looking at back at one of the episodes we had, and one of the things we were talking about is how it's important. Like, people are like, oh, you got to be a pastor. No, you just need to be a couple steps ahead of somebody to be able to help somebody. It's like, you don't have to have this title. You don't have this, oh, well, I got to get this degree and got to go to school. Like, no. But you just got to be ahead of somebody to help them.
Well, and I think being ahead or even being on the same level, but I think the key is like understanding and seeing the need. And then like being willing to meet. Like, because, my mom and her ladies group, they were all finding and exploring together.
Oh, yes.
So they weren't necessarily 2-3 steps ahead.
They were ahead in what she needed. That's the thing. I can still be behind other things. But what that person needs, like, I may suck at this, but I can help you.
And you can do the things. So the 12-step program, like, clinically, there's a lot of relapse in 12-step programs. They give you the tools that you need to, like, do the things. So you can do the program, do the things, do what's required, get all you need to graduate. But it takes you owning that and doing that. But it's easier with a support group. With people that have like gone through the program with you, but they're there to support you whenever you have those hard moments. Whenever you want to relapse, it's like, hey,
and I think that's like the key. Is that, like you said, a support group and community. Like, if you don't have that, and obviously I don't have statistics, but we all know. If you don't have the community and you don't have a support group,
you got something.
The likelihood, right? The likelihood of you failing drastically. And so, I think back on it, and I know my mom's still close with a good amount of them. Unfortunately, some of them have relapsed and have kind of fallen out of her life. But like, I still think back, and I'm so grateful and thankful for like all those ladies who like saw the need and were willing to like meet that and like support my mom and us through that. And so we started going to church, gave my life to Christ at the Newsboys concert when they did the altar call. And again, we were just, doing life, doing church. But from that point on, started to realize like, hey, like this is like something in my life that I want to explore more.
Right.
And again, not growing up in church, it was kind of rough, like just trying to understand like what is this?
Yes.
What is this faith that I'm like?
The church has a whole different language.
Yeah, like what is this faith that I'm like trying to explore and pursue? Like what is it? And like, I guess just not knowing that, especially being still young, and kind of having to find that for myself. But started doing church more, and we got involved in a Bible study group. My parents did, and for the most part, the majority of them were like my parents' age or a little younger.
Right.
But I would still go with them.
Right.
And so again, like community and the support group, we started going to Bible study regularly and meeting with them and getting into God's Word and doing lessons and things like that, kind of grasping concepts and hearing more mature, adult Christians, which at that time I don't know where they all were in their faith walk,
right.
but like still hearing and seeing them talk about that and feeling that out really helped me grow. And I want to say I was 10 or 11 at the time,
right?
When I ended up getting baptized. But my dad was really good friends with one of the like associate pastors at the church, which in Arizona, the church we went to was a mega church. It was gigantic. It's called CCD, Christ Church of the Valley, and now it's ridiculous. They have like 14 campuses and like
there a lot of space in the desert.
Yeah, at the time,
and the mountain.
Yeah, at the time they had like 6 or 7 campuses, but like 30,000 people attend like across all their campuses on them. And so, but he was friends with the associate pastor,
right.
And he ended up baptizing us, and stayed good friends with them for a while. But got baptized, and then again, after that, it was like, well, what is this? What does this mean to me, right?
Now
what is this like?
I got wet. I dried off. Now
yeah, what am I supposed to do? It's. But I think that was definitely a key experience in my life, and coming to like a realization of like, hey, I've didn't devote my life to this, and I've been set apart, and I know for sure though, like through high school and all that, like definitely still struggled with exploring that. And, I had my parents' Bible study group, but nobody my age to really explore that with, and I never really got plugged into the youth group there. It was very, again, kind of, it was a mega church, and it was very much so like just going for the experience. It was all hype, but not really like, I didn't ever feel like I connected with it. So I would just sit in main service with my parents, which it was still good, right?
Yeah.
Like,
what's that youth group though? 30,000 people.
Yeah,
Pastor
Don.
What does that look like? How many kids are going to the youth service? Like,
Pastor Don was awesome. He always brought that really good word. But in that church, it was, you feel lost in the size of it, right? Like, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. But like moving here, our church, like, I was dumbfounded when I first moved here, and even before I even moved here, when I visited, like seeing the size of it and how small and like tight knit the community was, but like, everybody knows everybody's name. So going from like mega church to, I guess our church is big though for like
because some people still think our church is too big.
So like,
what's considered mega church?
Going from like
30,000 people,
going from like 30,000 people with 7 campuses to like 1 campus and like 1,000 people on a weekend. It was a huge change. But that, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit more. I got that myself. So
that's okay.
Through high school, like started to kind of not get lost, but just I'm still reading my Bible and involved in church, but it was more like, again, what does that mean?
Right.
Yeah. And I kind of just like,
with all this?
yeah, like I would be in my word, but it was like, I don't know how to apply this to my life,
right?
Because I didn't have a lot of people, at my age as like a big accountability. Didn't have that community to be accountable. So I kind of got lost in a lot of that, but it was my junior year of high school. Was doing photography, doing the high school thing, enjoying myself and whatnot.
Cool.
And
I'm almost out.
Yeah, and so I was at the time I loved photography and was doing that, and this cute girl ended up commenting on one of my pictures on this app, and we started talking back and forth and messaging, and ended up getting into like calling each other and FaceTiming. Wow. And I was like, man, I kind of like this girl. And I lived in Arizona and she lived here. And, that ended up,
the Lord was speaking.
Yeah, blossoming into a relationship. And this girl, you guys know it, ended up being Jordan, who's my wife now.
I know her.
Yeah. And so I think that was something, like looking, obviously hindsight 2020, was the start of like a journey that I didn't know that I needed.
And I just want to put this in there, like you doing the things, like I don't know how this applies to me. I'm reading my Bible, I don't know how it applies to me, but then how God just provided that through your interest in photography.
Yeah.
And then that just came in, and then you meet her, of course, who can kind of match and kind of that person to be able to talk to about the
Yeah. And so like
you can do the
that's
things.
wild.
Just,
Yeah.
Whenever you feel like you're in a desert season, I'm just doing the things.
Yeah. And so, like this relationship starts to form, and of course, at the time I'm still in my word and everything. And just so happens she grew up in the church, grew up in our church.
Yeah.
And was a believer, was very heavily involved in youth group and fine arts, all that. And of course things, move quickly, and I'm going to keep the story condensed because it would take up the rest of our time. But, we start dating, and we moved a little quickly for the time, and we ended up breaking up. Gotcha. And so we were broken up for like 8 months. And again, in that time,
was it your fault?
Very much. It was two young people exploring a relationship. And at the time, like, it was my first serious.
Talking to people out of state was a season.
Yeah.
It's like, your current state, like, no, this ain't it. You're like, find somebody else.
Yeah, and of course, like, in high school, when you have, like, there's girls in front of you, I was not interested, like, hardly any of the girls at my school. And that was really, like, my first serious relationship. Right. And so, like, we were talking all the time and messaging, and it just consumed both of our lives. Yeah. And, at the time, she had really good wisdom and mentorship through, I think it was Gus. There's JR. And so she was involved in a lot, really heavily in the church. And so, he poured into her life and was like, hey, this is too much at the time. And again, for me, I'm in Arizona. I'm exploring my thing in high school, still trying to figure it out. And so we ended up breaking up. And at that time, it was pretty rough for me, honestly. Like, I felt very hurt. And again, I didn't like any of the girls at my school. So I was just like, all right, well, the one girl that I liked just broke up with me. And
it's okay.
So I kind of like...
Be single forever.
Yeah, so I kind of like spiraled it. And, again, high school, enjoyed myself. I went to some parties and, started going down a not great path. Right. Did that for a while, and of course, through that, I'm like, found dissatisfaction with a lot of that. Yeah. And then, I'm not sure how, I know it was the Lord, but I'm not sure how, it finally, like, clicked for me again, where I was like, this ain't it. This is not. Yeah. Like, I see, again, my mom, my dad going to AA and R&on. Like, I know that addictive personalities run in our family. Yeah. And coming to that realization of, like, this could end up really bad. Like, if I don't if I don't stop doing this. And so, I got back in my word again and started reading and exploring that. And I did that for a while, and it was out of the blue one day. After we broke up, she had deleted my number, blocked me, and everything. And out of the blue one day, it was just like the Lord told me, "Hey, you should text Jordan." And I didn't know why at the time, right? I just heard he said you should text her. So I just texted her, and I was like, "Hey, I just want you to know, I don't know what you're going through, but I've been thinking about you, and I'm praying." And that was it. I didn't really hear anything back for a while, but she told me later on, obviously after we started talking again, that at that time she had just broken up in a serious relationship. And she was distraught, and I had texted her literally just after.
Oh wow.
Saying "Hey, I'm thinking about you and I'm praying for you.
Remember me?"
And she was like, "Who is this?" Again, because she had deleted my number. And I was like, "It's Dillon." And she was like, "Oh my gosh." And so so through that, we started to rebuild our relationship again. Texting back and forth again. And this time though, again, with wise counsel through church members on her side, and obviously us talking and being a little more mature. It started off a little slower, and of course, for me too, I was hurt, and so it took me a while to
trust it again,
bring the walls down and let her back in. But through that, we started talking, and before we had broken up too, we had talked about me coming out to visit. And so when we broke up, it was just before that. There's some small details. And my mom had already bought a flight, and Jordan's mom, Kelly, was like, "Yeah, maybe not. We're since you guys broke up, we call it off." And so my mom, this is kind of fast forwarding a little bit. Obviously, we started talking again, dating, and my mom was flying out here with her sister to go to Peter Frampton concert. Wow. And so she came out and went to this concert, and it ended up falling on the same weekend that Jordan's birthday was, her 16th birthday. Wow. And so my mom actually met Jordan before I ever did. She went to her 16th birthday. And so
she's scouting it out.
Yeah. And so so Kelly, Jordan's mom, and my mom both hit it off and were great friends. Of course, my mom met Jordan, loved her. And that was really the start of our relationship being serious. Because then at that time, both moms
the mom approval.
The moms approved of it, right? And so we
started. Video out there too of the meeting in the airport.
Don't surface it, please.
Don't.
Yeah. We'll keep it. We'll keep that under. We'll keep that under wraps.
Awesome.
But it's the moms approved of it, so it was official, right? We can make this work. And so what came after that was probably a year and a half of me flying out here to visit her flying to Arizona to visit, this back and forth. And a few of the times I'd come out, I went to youth group, and this was right, I guess, in that transition between it would have been was Gus?
Gus was the college pastor. JR was
It was in the transition between JR and Brian. And it was one of the first times I visited. We went to youth group there. And of course, Brittany and all of our good friends that we have now. But went to youth group with her, and that's really how I started at our church. And went to youth group, loved it. It's awesome. Pastor Brian just started, and got to meet a lot of them, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." Again, coming from a giant church, to
nobody knows you,
a small church in a community,
giant church of adults,
yeah, and then coming to a smaller church with community and a true youth group. I'd never been to a youth group before, and especially a smaller group kids like kind of my age. Of course, at that time I would have been older than the majority of them. I would have been like 17 or 18.
Yeah,
getting ready to come out of youth group.
But all the youth leaders, like, around.
There was a lot of youth leaders at that time who would have been like early 20s. And so I like started exploring our relationship and traveling back and forth, and started to get plugged into the church, at least when I would come to visit. And after high school, I graduate. Not sure what I'm going to do, right? I know I don't really want to go to college. It wasn't my thing. But I also didn't keep a lot of friends out of high school. Didn't like a lot of people in high school, to be honest. And again, like, a lot of them were not great influences.
Right.
And I didn't have like a solid community. So for me, I just went straight into work.
Yeah.
I worked for probably like 8 or 9 months, and in that time, I'm still traveling back and forth. And I come to this realization of, I know I don't want to stay here. I don't really have a reason to stay here other than my family. For me, though, like, family is like the core of kind of my existence outside of Christ. Like, family is ingrained in who I am.
Mm.
And that was probably the hardest part, though.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, like, I had this immense calling to drop what I was doing in Arizona and move here. And so, at 18, fresh out of high school,
here we go.
We're working at jobs, saved up some money, ended up buying my own car.
Nice.
The Honda?
And the Honda Civic.
Wow.
Old Faithful.
Honda. This is Nissan country, but Honda all day. Sorry.
Yeah, so like, I bought my own car, and my poor mom. It was around December, I think. I had decided, like, I'm gonna do this. Like, I'm
so
at
Christmas, you broke your mom's heart.
Well, early December. I basically gave my mom like a month's notice. I'm like, hey, mom, like,
this is payback for that 50.
Yeah. So like, her Jordan's great. Yeah, it actually worked out. So like, Jordan's grandma was and needed somebody to take care of her because Kelly was working, and the family wasn't able to support us much.
Right.
And I was like, hey, what if I like move in with you and I kind of help you after your surgery, and you give me like a little bit of a break on like rent. Right. So I packed up. I told my mom, gave her a month's notice at the beginning of December. Mom, I'm moving in a month. I'm packing up all my stuff into my car and
in the Honda,
driving,
rolling out.
So she was like, well, I'll come with you. Okay. If that helps you. She cried for like a month straight. But I think she came to the realization. The whole ride. I think she came to the realization of like, oh, he's actually serious about it. Yeah. Which I was. I was like, this is what I feel called to do. And so like January, packed up my car. My mom jumped in the car with me, and we started driving.
With a box of Kleenex?
Yeah. It was. We were in the car for 3 days together, so she had plenty of time to cry. And we,
I just picture every time she opens the door, like water just flows out the door.
No, actually, she actually didn't really have. She actually didn't have that much time to cry because we were fighting the whole time. Like, I don't know. Being cooped up in a car with your mom for 3 days.
I will say too, some of my like worst fights with my friends when we were separating. Me and Will had a big fight before we like separated from each other from living together for a couple of years. Yeah. And the basis of it is we were sad to be leaving each other. That's why we were fighting. Yeah. It's like, like, why don't we just say that? We just had a big argument. Trying to destroy our friendship. Like, I'm just sad you went. So
we were just arguing the whole time, right? Like, it was good, but we get here, and after we get here, it was like, yeah, Mom, I could do without seeing you for a while. But we get here, we get my stuff moved into Pat's house, and
this is in Mount Juliet.
And she stayed for a few days, and ends up flying home, dropped her off at the airport, and I was here. And at that time, right, like, again, 18, just moved to Tennessee. I don't know anybody. I'm like just here, and I'm doing it, right. And so, I think that was, obviously, looking back again, that was a huge test for me. And the uncertainty, having very little community, and anything like that. I'm thankful for Jordan's parents and for the church, right? Of really like getting me plugged in. And her mom, obviously, with Jordan's best interest in mind, really set out like guidelines for us. And she was like, well, if you're going to live here, you got to start going to school. Yeah. You got to get a job and you got to go to church. Yeah. And so that's what I did. I started looking for a job, right? Which ended up being a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I got I started looking into schooling, which, you know, I'm grateful my parents helped me. I got plugged into Motlow, started, you know, getting some schooling going at Motlow, and then, immediately started jumping in and going to church and got plugged in youth. Of course, again, I was past the age of being a youth, so I wasn't. It's a technicality. I wasn't partaking in youth, but I would, you know, talk to Pastor Brian. You know, Pastor Brian started to get me plugged in and trusted me enough to like start helping, kind of as a leader, but without being a youth leader at the time. Kind of had to prove myself to him more, and I'm just this random kid who just moved here and tried to start helping with youth service, right? So he was a little tentative, and you know, hey, you can help around in these little things, but like we'll have to see how you end up fitting in. So that's what I did for a while. You know, I was just commuting back and forth between Laverne and going and seeing Jordan, and you know, obviously exploring. They were in Laverne, yeah. So,
Mount Juliet's Laverne.
Mount Juliet to Laverne is about 45 minutes. 45 minutes one way.
Yeah. And 840 probably was not a thing.
It was, but it was very scattered. Okay, somebody who just moved here, like I'm driving down 840 in Arizona, there's streetlights everywhere unless you go like way out. Here it's like pitch black everywhere. I'm driving down like
if you leave downtown, pitch black.
Yeah, I'm driving down like backcountry roads from Mount Juliet to Laverne, like praying to the Lord that I don't crash and die on the back roads. And so you know, like we start to explore our relationship. Like start getting plugged in at church and youth, and it took me a while to end up getting a job. And you know, that was the biggest front that I was needing help with at the time. And I started praying, like, you know, hey, money's starting to dwindle, right? I've been here for six. I think it was about 6 to 8 months or so. And you know, I'm like, hey, like I need a way to sustain myself, and like, you know, I can't live with Jordan's grandma forever. No, right. And so
Nor do you want to.
Yeah, I started really praying about it.
She's trying to take care of herself. So
yeah. And so at the time, Zach, who's my brother-in-law now, was working at Amazon. He was doing night shift at Amazon, and he had recommended, like, hey, you should try to apply. And I'm like, okay, so I apply, and I applied to other places. I ended up doing a ride-along with U.S. Test. And I'll tell you what, I did one ride-along, and it was like in the wintertime, and I had to crawl under a house and do insulation, spiders and everything. I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good. Right. And
the Lord's not in this.
Yeah, didn't hear anything for a while. And ended up like checking my email one day. I just had this like urgency and sense to check my email, and I do, and I check my junk mail because I was like, I haven't heard anything from anybody. Yeah. So I checked my junk mail, and I see that Amazon had reached out to me like 3 weeks prior, and I just missed it because it went to my junk mail.
Because they were hiring when they came, they took all of our college.
Yeah, they were.
Anyone in town need work.
Yeah, correct. We've got on time.
Yeah, and so found an email from them saying, "Hey, like, you have basically here's your start date or your orientation."
Oh wow!
Yeah, like here's your orientation
in spam,
and it's crazy because I had already scheduled to fly out to go to my brother's graduation, and I got the orientation was for the day after I was supposed to get back.
Oh wow!
So I get back from my brother's graduation, go to orientation at Amazon, end up getting, you know, my job that I have, first job at Amazon. Yeah. And so like, get the job, and now like all my like 3 pieces of needs had been met. Yes. Got my job, you know, got plugged into school. Yeah, I got plugged into the church. And that's, I think, when really like God started orchestrating everything. That was the start of my journey to where I am. Yeah. Finally got the job, and we had talked before we started the episode. Blake at the time, you had been out of school for a little while.
I was out of school, but still living in a campus apartment because my two best friends were still finishing up their last year of college.
And so, I finally got a job, and I was like, hey, like, I want to get out on my own 2 feet. Please. I want to get out of living with Jordan's grandma. And I really want to, like, start building my life. Yeah. That was a terrifying thing. And at the time, at my first warehouse job, I'm not making good money. Yeah. So, like, I'm broke. I have no way to, like, get my own apartment. And Jordan knew Blake, and one of his roommates was moving out at the time. Right. And so she texted him, like, hey, you were looking for a new roommate, right? And he was like, yeah. And so that's when I was first introduced to Blake. Crazy. Other than, like, meeting a few times at church. Yeah. Was when we moved in together. Wow.
To be fair, me and my roommate, we were going to move to this place where it was kind of expensive, kind of out of our means. But I'm like, listen, we got to get off campus. We're both going to be graduated. I don't know this area anymore. But we meet. I said, well, what do we do? And then Jordan just happened to text us like, hey, if you need, like, a third person, I'm like, that would cut our cost. I said we could move into, like, a really, really nice spot. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So he came over and hung out with us. And it was just like, it's like we've known each other for a little forever.
Yeah, like, we immediately clicked, and it was like, we were best friends that had separated for a while. Right. But, like, when you come back, it's like you left off. Yep. And it was like nothing ever happened. Yeah. That was how it was. But, like, that, I think, was a very, like, key point in my life was when we first, met, we got plugged in, we started living together. Yeah. At the time, Blake was, heavily involved through the church and through, Eddie. We had Pi Alpha at MTSU. Oh, yes. And so, again, in that, like, hybrid of, like, not being a youth anymore, but not super being, like, college age yet. Mm-hmm. And, again, I wasn't going to MTSU. I was going to Montlow. Right. And so I wasn't sure what to do. And, Blake was like, hey, you should come to Chi Alpha. So, I started going to Chi Alpha. I think even Jordan came with me a few times. And, of course, I made an exception because she wasn't college age. But
she's about to graduate.
Yeah, like, so we know her. So I started going to Chi Alpha and got plugged in. And I think that's was a really pivotal point in, like, my faith journey, was, like, really starting to get plugged in with people my age and understanding, like, who is the Holy Spirit. Right. Praying more, which I had only dabbled in when I was younger before I moved here. Because, again, like, I didn't grow up in church, and my only experience of church was reading my Bible and going to, like, Christian concerts and being in my parents' Bible group, and it was like the only praying we did was at the end, right? Of, like, any prayer requests, that type of thing. That was the only praying that I had really done. Yeah. And so, like, through Chi Alpha and being involved in our church, it was very spirit centered, full of prayer and really amazing faithful leaders in our community. They got me plugged in, and I think that was probably one of the starts of that journey. I'm trying to remember
where I think it was because you were doing, like, the young adults life group.
Yes, with your wife, me and Connie came to Pastor Eddie about a vision. I think Connie had, like, I knew that we had the need, but Connie had the idea, like, we should talk to Pastor Eddie about this. Yeah. And Pastor Eddie, we know, it's you bring an idea to him. This is your idea. It's yours. Yeah, it's your baby. I'm not gonna, like, officiate this. Yeah. So me and Connie, like, got that.
Yeah. He'll support, but it's on you.
She was like, I don't know how I ended up this.
Yeah. Because I wasn't doing it by myself, Connie. That's why I was like, oh, that sounds great. So we're doing this together, right?
Yeah. And so,
come with me.
It's a team effort.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, like, I think really, I started building some of that community. Like I said, we started, that was the start of Generations. Yes. And then Greg, in his wisdom, was like, hey, if you're going to be coming to church, like, you gotta serve. Yeah. And so, like, I started helping out with ushering. So, I was doing ushering and finally got plugged into Generations. really started to build that community that I think is obviously necessary.
Yeah.
At least for me at that time, to understand your faith and really start to like build your foundation of like applying that to my life.
And within that community, there's always provision.
Yeah. And so met a lot of like awesome people, and really started getting plugged into the church, and that was just what kind of like propelled me forward for years and years, and building that community and seeing God's provision. He started helping me progress in Amazon. For years I was like, well, of course I want to marry Jordan, but I'm broke, right? Like, and even after we got married, I was still broke for a while. But
she's getting a ring pop.
Yeah. And so like, I'm like, if this is something I want, in order to do that, Lord, I need like provisions, right? Like I gotta step it up if I want to provide for a family, and like trusting the Lord and building my faith and being able to ask, for boldness and things. He really blessed me with being able to work my way through Amazon, and I always talk, and even looking back and reflecting on it, like seeing him in all the steps of like, like
the way that you like came into Amazon too, and the way you like went up the ladder was really
and so like that obviously like it wasn't like it was me having the boldness and courage to like ask him, hey, like for me I saw like I don't want to be a warehouse worker for the rest of forever. I see this is not something I enjoy. So like, Lord, I'm gonna need you to help me out, because like I'm not happy, right?
He gave me that vision. He'll give you steps.
And so like, really, like he started orchestrating. I got one promotion, and of course, like I've really, through my faith, I pride myself on being like somebody who's open, and I build connections, and I'm very genuine, and I love people. I love to converse with people. That's like half the reason. I built a lot of the connections I have at Amazon. It's just, having that ability to just connect with people and be genuine. And so like through that, I built a lot of connections, and I just saw like, the Lord really orchestrated through those connections, and, like me trusting in him of like, hey, like, again, I want to marry this girl. I need provisions to like, help me be able to support a family, and, really just watch him kind of weave that, over the course of years, and like kind of bringing me up, the rungs, and putting me in places that I never saw.
The beauty of that is that you had the patience, to let him navigate you. I think a lot of times, especially when we're young adults, man, like we just want to go and want to get it. Like, I got to get this money.
And there's that pressure of like having to like meet a certain standard by a deadline, that kind of thing. So it's
and I think what was kind of key in that was, again, like I was doing schooling, right? But like I didn't have a degree, and I've never liked school to begin with, and so like I kind of saw like, hey, the school thing, like I'm gonna end up stepping back away from it. So it was
not about long term.
School is the warehouse.
By my own doing, right? I was forced to like rely on it because I don't have a degree, right? And to be where I am now, like, it was not by my own doing, because I don't have a degree, which like I should still be working just a warehouse job. But but now, right? Like I'm connected with people like who've been in the business for decades, and like people who are way more qualified than I am. And I've been able to be set apart like as a leader on my team. Nice. And of course, like that was not me. It was God.
So what Dillon's trying to say, he's not the CEO of Amazon. So if you have any questions,
no, but
remember this space,
right?
This is the origin story. It'll be on your boxes soon.
So like through this whole journey, right? Like, not growing up in church, and like family struggles, and growing up and like having to do life, even in the times where it didn't make sense to me, or like I didn't know how to apply my faith and my church and the Bible like to my life at that time. Like, even though I wasn't super deep into it, the Lord like still had his kind of hand over me and was moving and putting pieces in place, you know, like putting key people in my life and you know, putting me in certain places that allowed me to really like, you know, explore my faith and really like again build a foundation of like, man, he's supported me, he's been there, he's orchestrated it, and I look back and I'm like, yeah, I would not have ever been where I am now if it wasn't also for people like my mom's ladies group, who are faith filled, and who saw a need and were willing to like meet that need for my mom, and through that, like obviously supported my family and like really put my brothers and I like, you know, catapulted us into faith. And again, like our church, growing up in that mega church, very unpersonable. Yeah, you feel like a drop in the ocean. Like there's no, obviously I'm sure there are people who find community there, but as a young person being at an adult church and not being plugged in, then coming here with a smaller church who is like, we're all about community and it's all Christ centered. And because it's smaller, it's way more personal. And again, we have a lot of people who are around, you know, my age who I was able to connect with and get plugged in, and that support group through Generation, and even what do we after Generation we rebranded.
It became just FWC Young Adults.
Yeah, like FWC Young Adults, and then
then there was two groups off of that.
Still under FWC Young Adults. It was like
Gen X and Gen Y. And then, those have been rebranded. Well, and then between that was again a lot of our younger adults between like graduating college and like under 30.
We're so good at community, y'all, that we had like people from like 20 to like 35. We all just hang out, right? We're all just like, we're all in different seasons of life, and we all love each other and have grown up together. So it's like, how do we like separate and navigate? Because we need to, because we're all in different life spaces, but also we all kind of like hanging out together. Like, what do we do?
And then
we can't keep hanging out with high school guys.
And then in that, like all of our really close friends. And then
we lead them as youth leaders, and then it's like, oh yeah, we just come alongside and plug them in.
Well, and then of course, like you get into that weird space of like you're not young anymore, but you're not old, and there's nothing really there to like build community. And that's
it's like being in Phoenix.
It's like
even people if they're 40 to like 45, like 50, they feel that too sometimes. I don't feel like I'm like I'm not a high school graduate, obviously, but I'm also not in the grave. Like, I mean,
it's like a black hole of like support and community that just doesn't exist. And you know, thankful for Connie and Katie, Pastor John and Katie, who like stepped up and helped with Generations too, where they see that need and you know they built a community there. And you know, then a lot of our friends who are in Generation X, they started having babies, and so then it's like you have like people who are single.
They started having babies.
So like
babies with a Z.
Then our group was like, Then you had our group went from including singles and couples,
right,
to having singles and couples, and then families of young adults with kids. And so then it was like this weird like hybrid of like,
whose baby is this?
Like we had high schoolers coming into that because like that was like hey like you know like hey this is our age gap, and it was just too wide. So then we split off into some more groups, or not youth groups but young adult groups. And then I think just one kind of last key piece, at least in this current season, again like found myself in this kind of black hole, like going to church and like I have that faith, but I don't have like a super like community around my age, to really like bond with and connect with and have that accountability. And Pastor Nick, you know, almost was like anointed with this calling to like step up
the mantle,
and help. And you know, a lot of people kind of prayed that into existence, and he was.
It was all about timing.
He was willing to accept that calling. In this season of life right now, that has been huge.
Yes.
Like sustained.
Now the rebranding is Elevate.
Elevate. Yeah. Yes. Elevate. Pastor Nick, shout out.
Yes,
you're awesome.
Yes,
if you're between high school and we'll say 25 to 30, but you're like single, hit us up. Elevate. Pastor Nick, he's awesome.
He's gonna make it happen.
And so between that and Jordan and I kind of coming alongside Nick and Brittany and being leaders and support in that, like having a lot of younger people who it's fun to like just pour into them and like see them explore their faith, and like we've had a lot of people
find that community.
Yeah, who that's been like key, right? Like they've been lost and they've been able to find that community, and there's people who've gone. I'm not going to say names, but like there's people who they grew up in the church, and they had very little faith, and they've had a lot of experiences where like church hurt and lack of faith, and through Pastor Nick and some of these other people, like they started to see Christ through that, and they would come in every Wednesday, and we were able to like pour into them and see that turnaround of somebody who only came to church because their family was coming, to really start to build that connection. And, they ended up leaving before, like they didn't get baptized or anything, but like to be able to pour into those people. And again, we even have people who grew up in the church and who have found that community. And I'll say one last thing. It was probably years ago. We were out at coffee with Nick one time, and this is for people behind the camera listening. We were talking about troubles and trials and faith testing, and I think he had said at one point, like, sometimes it's hard for me to like relate and share my story and my testimony because like I don't have these big trials and things in my life, and like I grew up in church and like I've been blessed that way, and for those of you who feel that way, count that as like a blessing that you've had generational favor on your life, and other people who do share their testimonies, and it is ugly and dirty, but you see the redemption story, like that's also amazing. But don't feel like you're
don't discount it.
Don't discount the fact that like like being tested and pushed through like these tough points in your life, like in some cases like it's necessary, and like obviously there is a redemption story to that, but that is so unnecessary, and you don't need that
to have a testimony,
and obviously for God to like use your life. So that's just
and also for you all that grew up in church and you found it a struggle to fight to make it personal and not break out of that. I just have been doing it because my family's does what we've always done, because it is a generational thing. If you're still in that spot, you're struggling to make Jesus personal to you. We don't discount your story. It can be rough sometimes to make it real. You've seen a lot of displays. I grew up in Pentecostal holiness, so like seeing a lot of like showy stuff happen. That's what that is, but it's all show. It's a shell. Essentially.
Just dig into the word and really you gotta find that, and I think count your blessings as like being having favor and generational protection, and
look for that community. Like do not devalue the desperate need.
And actually I noted down some scriptures kind of
bring the word
for some of those
while you're
journeys.
Pulling those up,
go ahead.
I want to say this, like, obviously all glory is to God.
Absolutely.
For everything that happens in our life, everything he walks us through. But we have this thing called free will. And so God can't make us do anything. And so what I don't want you to do is discount the fact that you stayed in the middle of the things he was walking you through. You could have just said, okay, Amazon ain't it. Let me go find another job.
Yeah.
Because that's what most people do.
It's good.
They're like, okay, they're not paying me enough. Let me throw some applications out here. But instead, and this is why I was saying you had the patience. You're like, okay, well, let me work this thing.
Yeah.
Let me see what's here, what opportunities are here. Let me talk to some people because that's what I do well.
Yeah.
Right? And let God work this thing out.
Yeah.
Where most people are like, okay, I ain't got time for this.
Yeah.
They ain't paying me enough. I'm out.
Yeah.
And this is why you see so much turnover in jobs, especially warehouse jobs. They're like, oh, okay, well, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
And so your steadiness, which is one of the things I love about you, steadiness and consistency to say, okay, well, let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's still something you have to do.
Yeah.
That's a choice you have to make. Right?
Yeah.
The Lord will honor that.
Yeah. And
so what we see in your life is, okay, I'm going to see how this works out. And the Lord has said, okay, I'm going to honor that.
Yeah.
I'm going to open this door for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to create this opportunity for you. I'm going to make space for you in a space where they're like, does he belong here? Don't matter. The Lord said he's going here.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And I think that's why I think it's been that way because for me, like, I understand that I'm not the most qualified. Yeah. And I'm not, like, it's not of my own doing. And I realize that, like, I couldn't be there if I were to take it by my own reins and try to, drive and steer it. Yeah. I think that's what's helped me. Somewhere. Yeah. That's what's helped me, right, is understanding, like, I can't do it on my own. Right. Like, and I am not where I am because of my own doing. Yeah. Right. And so that's helped me, obviously, understand that I've been blessed and the Lord has favored me through that. And why would I try to change that? Oh, yeah. Like, I'm not going to take the reins and, like, try to steer my own destiny when I see and I understand. Yeah. He's clearly got this. He's clearly brought me to where I am now. So why am I going to try to take that over? Because I'm going to end up messing it up. And I don't want to do that. Yeah. So,
and the word says your gift will make. Yes. And Dillon is 100% the person when he's around, you want him around. Yes. This just, I don't know how to explain it. Like, whenever he's in the room, you want him to be there. So the fact that God is, like, making space for you and putting you in places where you don't feel qualified. Like, you have something about, there's just the spirit in you is like, people don't know why, but he needs to be in this room. He needs to be here. You want him to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I got a few scriptures just for a few little pieces kind of relating to my story. So, for provision, for those people who are, like, on a journey, and then also for trust in that as well. Okay. So kind of some scriptures for provision, those of you who need provision from the Lord. 2 Corinthians 9, verse 8, and God is able to bless you abundantly in all things, in all times, having all that you need. You will abound in every good work. Philippians 4:19, and this same God who takes care of me will supply your needs from His glorious riches, which have been given to us through Christ Jesus. Prayers for those of you who are on a journey. We're all on a journey, right? Yeah. But kind of this is what helped me in my journey was Hebrews 12:1. He encourages people to rid themselves of their burdens and sin and to persevere in the race and running the race that lies before you. Judges 18, verse 5 through 6. The journey a person is setting out on is under the eye of the Lord. So he's watching out for you. Yes. He's guiding you. Yep. His word is like a lamp unto your feet. You stay in the word and he's gonna persevere you and he's gonna really help you. Along that journey, he's there with you. Don't discount that. And then also for trust. There's been a lot of times where, again, I'm not qualified. I have to have faith, right? Like, I've set my trust in the Lord and he's going to do right by me. So, Jeremiah 17, 7 through 8, blessed are those who trust in the Lord and they will be like a tree planted by water. Yes. Isaiah 41:10, people should not be afraid because God is with them and he will strengthen and help them. And then Romans 8:28, God works all things for the good of those who love him. So those are just a few, kind of scriptures that, as through reading and really like reflecting back on, like those sustain me through those kind of different pieces of my journey and season. And I mean, right now with our church and even with Jordan and I, like the Lord is moving at our church. He's doing a lot of great things, and I'm excited. I'm excited for what's to come. Again, blessed, favored, and our community is, I think, lucky to have Pastor Bryce and Sarah. And,
for sure.
You know, I wouldn't be here without the Lord and, you know, the community that we have. Yeah. You guys, you know, our church leaders and, all the senior saints at church. Every Sunday you come in and they're happy to see you. It's like you're their own kid. You know, they pray for you. People who, you know, intercede for you when you're going through trouble, and
they cheer for you louder than the people you think would be cheering for.
Yeah. Community, and then, I mean, Pastor Bryce and Sarah having, you know, wisdom and you know, bringing other people in who are filled and, you know, who have the gift of prophecy and spoken into my life, and you know, seeing all that. So that's what has brought me here today, and you know, I don't know. The Lord is good. That's all I can say.
That's all I know.
Blessed and good, favored, and I couldn't do it without him. So.
Yeah, it's it's funny, man. Like the way he puts things together.
Yeah.
And like bringing you guys into my life, and the whole timing of that, and honestly, like you were recapping some of that, and like some of those things I remember, and then some of it just a blur. Like it happened so fast.
Yeah.
Like it went from who's this weird guy that just keeps showing up, it's hanging out with Joe, like oh, he's here now. Oh, okay. And then, you know, it's like there was a leap of time, you know, and then COVID kind of happened, so that made it like a weird leap of time of like, hey, Dillon's here. Oh, Dillon's here.
Yeah.
Type thing, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was just, it's been wild.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I think that's actually, you know, a really good point, and I kind of had to do that for this again. You're like, what are you going to talk about? I don't know. So I had to reflect, right? And I think that's actually a really good point, that reflection is necessary.
Yes. Because how often we forget. Like, it's like, me and Nick even talk about it. I said, Nick, have we known each other since we were kids? Like, how long have you been?
Right.
Time. And it's like, man, how long?
So, like, it is true. I even look back a lot of times.
Yeah.
Things are a blur. Like I said, I don't remember some key timelines in my life because it moves so quickly and certain things, and it's important and necessary to like sit down and just really like reflect back on your life. And, reflect back on your life and like find joy and like you know, faith and trust in the Lord and all that. That when I sit back and I look and I'm like, man, like that, it's so cool, and I know that like He orchestrated it all.
All of it. Like, you know, I remind people, you go back to the Old Testament, and one of the things He told them to do is to pass this on. Tell your children and your children's children of the things I've done. You know, and that's part of what we're doing here. Is telling people of the things He's done. So it can
scripturally, it'll start off.
Yes.
Somebody came on and forgot. And here we are. That's like, hey, man, here we go. Someone forgot.
We're going to bring it to your remembrance today.
Yeah. Which I think is also super cool, because I don't think a lot of people, well, maybe they do, because if they know you, they know.
Yeah.
But like, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing a podcast. I wouldn't be on the show.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for your like love and drive to like share that and be obedient to like bringing that news and our stories and like how the Lord has worked through things to people, to be an encouragement and to like, I hope and I know and I pray that like what we talk about from season 1, starting this new season, the guests that are going to be on, like, we are going to like touch somebody's life behind the camera. And like, if we do that for one person, like, it's all
it's all worth it.
And I know, you know, but again, like, back to you, just to throw some, you know, praise on you, is like, none of this would have happened without your vision and like the Lord placing that on you to make this happen.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's also terrible.
Yeah, I mean,
that's support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have support meetings after every.
It's a little,
okay, we can do it. We can keep doing this.
It will happen.
Yes.
Again, it's not by our own.
It's by the Lord moving and our obedience, man. And I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
None of this happens by myself.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about community. This is our community.
Yeah.
This little venture we're on, wherever it goes, wherever the Lord takes it, we're gonna go. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. I'm excited.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Again, this is Mr.
Dillon Hinson,
the man behind the scenes. So it's blessed. It's gonna work. We put it in Dill's hands. It's gonna work every single time. So thank you guys. Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are out of here. That's episode 1, season 2. Peace.